Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast.
Mm-hmm.
If a political leader wins a massive legislative supermajority, does that make them unstoppable, or does absolute power just make the systemic pushback even harder?
Yeah, I mean, that is basically the ultimate political stress test, right?
Right.
And we are watching this exact dynamic play out in Tokyo right now. And honestly, the friction it's generating, it's just shaking the entire Japanese political establishment to its core.
It really is. So today we are looking at a freshly published piece of crucial journalism titled, "Japan's Popular Prime Minister is Burning Political Capital Fast."
Yeah, such a fascinating piece.
It is. It is. And to just set the scene for you, the listener, the article opens with this truly striking visual.
Oh, it's a memorial.
Exactly. Prime Minister Takaichi Sanai is standing there before this elaborate array of white flowers. She's at a memorial this month honoring former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, who, was assassinated 4 years ago.
Right, yeah.
And she basically positions herself as his true political heir. She vows to the crowd, and this is a quote, "I want to be a politician who fights like Mr. Abe."
Which is, wrapping yourself in the mantle of modern Japan's most consequential leader is a heavy burden to carry.
Yeah.
Because Abe, he defined an entire era of Japanese politics. But the complication Takaichi is facing is that the reality of this fight she's talking about is turning into a war of attrition against her own government's machinery.
Yeah, and that paradox right at the heart of this article is just fascinating. Because we are looking at a leader who has overwhelming electoral support, right?
Right.
And a notoriously punishing work ethic, yet she is watching her political capital just evaporate right before her eyes. Like, back in February, she led the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP, to this massive victory.
Historic victory, really.
Exactly. They secured a 2/3 supermajority in the lower house of the Diet, which is Japan's national legislature.
Yeah, and just to put that into perspective for anyone who, maybe isn't familiar with the Japanese parliamentary system.
Please do.
So the Diet is bicameral, much like the U.S. Congress or the British Parliament. You have an upper house and a lower house.
Okay.
But the lower house, the House of Representatives, is where the real power sits.
Mm-hmm.
It chooses the prime minister, it passes the budget, ratifies treaties.
So it's the big one.
Exactly. And a 2/3 supermajority in that specific chamber is effectively a constitutional blank check. It is the kind of mandate most politicians literally spend their entire careers chasing.
Right. So with a blank check like that, you would assume her agenda would just glide through Parliament by Monday morning?
You would think so.
But instead, she's facing this severe gridlock. Like, the LDP had to extend the latest Diet session by a full week, stretching all the way until July 25th, just to finish routine legislative business.
Yeah, it's wild.
And the annual budget framework, known as the Honobudo, was finalized incredibly late, on July 21st.
Yeah, and Tobias Harris from the consultancy Japan Foresight, he's quoted in the piece and makes a really sharp observation about this.
What does he say?
He basically notes that she is powerful, but not all powerful. The sheer mass of her electoral victory just hasn't translated into administrative efficiency.
See, I read this situation like someone who just went out and bought a Ferrari.
Okay, I like that.
Right? Like, the 2/3 supermajority is this massive, roaring engine. But she pulls out of the dealership and immediately realizes she is stuck in bumper-to-bumper Tokyo traffic.
Yeah.
She has the horsepower to do absolutely whatever she wants, but the institutional gridlock is completely boxing her in. She just can't actually move any faster than the system allows. But what exactly is the traffic in this scenario?
So the traffic is this deeply entrenched cultural and political phenomenon in Japan known as nemawashi.
Nemawashi.
Right.
Oh.
And literally translated, digging around the roots of a tree to prepare for transplantation.
Wow, okay.
But in a political context, it's the painstaking behind-the-scenes process of building consensus.
Right.
You do not just introduce a bill in Japan.
Right, you don't just spring it on people.
Exactly. You spend months quietly consulting faction leaders, opposition members, bureaucrats, business executives, basically ensuring everyone feels heard and nobody loses face.
And she's not doing that.
No. Takaichi is attempting to drive her Ferrari straight over all those delicate roots.
Which explains so much, because the article heavily emphasizes this slow pace of bill passage, pointing out she is passing bills at a slower rate than the last 3 prime ministers, even slower than her immediate predecessor, Ishiba Shigeru, who was, actually trying to govern with a minority coalition.
Right, but I think we actually need to aggressively challenge the article's framing on that specific point.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the reporting uses the low volume of past legislation as prime evidence that she's struggling. But we should probably ask ourselves, is the sheer quantity and speed of bills passing actually the right metric for political success?
Wait, if you have a supermajority, shouldn't you be passing more legislation, not less?
I mean, only if you're passing routine administrative laws, right? Like naming bridges, making minor tax adjustments, tweaking existing regulations. That kind of bureaucratic housekeeping goes quickly.
Right, the easy stuff.
Exactly. But Takeichi isn't trying to do that. She is attempting to completely rewire the Japanese state. Pushing through paradigm-shifting legislation naturally takes longer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, friction is a feature, not a bug, when you're trying to change the fundamental direction of a nation's foreign policy and economy.
See, that distinction fundamentally changes how we should view her term so far. She's not just sitting idle in traffic. She is using her mandate to force through highly controversial foundational shifts, particularly in national security.
Absolutely.
Like, she recently spearheaded the creation of the Japan Foreign Investment Committee, which launched last month. The article likens it to America's CFIUS, screening foreign investments to protect national security. But the bigger move seems to be this massive overhaul of Japan's intelligence capabilities.
Yeah, and this intelligence reform is, frankly, a tectonic shift in East Asian geopolitics. For the first time since 1945, Japan is establishing a powerful, centralized intelligence apparatus. They have a new bureau and council launching literally this month.
Wow.
And to understand why this matters, you have to look at the post-war context. Following World War II, Japan adopted a pacifist constitution.
Right.
And the institutional design deliberately fragmented the state's intelligence gathering across different, often competing ministries.
So they wouldn't have too much power in one place.
Exactly. The whole goal was to prevent the consolidation of power that characterized the wartime military state.
So by centralizing state intelligence under the prime minister's office, she is effectively dismantling a cornerstone of Japan's post-war pacifist posture.
Yes. Overturning nearly 80 years of deliberate decentralization is bound to cause systemic shockwaves. I mean, it alters how Japan interacts with allies like the U.S. and how it postures against regional rivals like China and North Korea.
It's massive. And beyond national security, she is aggressively stoking domestic culture wars, too.
Yeah, the flag law.
Right, her party pushed through a controversial law criminalizing the desecration of the Japanese flag. But the most fraught legislation deals with the survival of the Japanese imperial house itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imperial succession is perhaps the most delicate cultural issue in Japanese society today.
And it's really important to note for you, the listener, that we aren't taking a stance on the succession laws themselves here. We are just impartially looking at how using a supermajority to bypass public opinion is a massive political gamble.
Right? Absolutely.
So the political reality is that the imperial family is running out of male heirs. The current emperor's only child is a daughter, Princess Aiko. And the article states that a vast majority of the Japanese public actually supports female succession, which would allow Princess Aiko to eventually take the throne.
Mm-hmm.
And Takeichi had initially promised to find a national consensus on this issue.
But instead of consensus, she utilized her supermajority to unilaterally force through a bill allowing distant male relatives to succeed, explicitly keeping women off the throne.
Which is wild given the polling.
Yeah. I mean, this was heavily favored by her socially conservative base, but deeply, deeply unpopular with the general public.
Which brings up a critical question about how she manages her political capital. Following her election win, she had an approval rating hovering around 70%.
Which is huge.
Huge. So does ramming through a deeply unpopular succession bill show true political fortitude, or is it a massive miscalculation? Like, why intentionally burn through sky-high approval ratings to alienate the majority of the public?
Well, it suggests a leader who prioritizes ideological purity over long-term political survival. She is spending her capital to satisfy the hardline conservative wing of the LDP, assuming, probably hoping, her supermajority insulates her from the public's immediate backlash.
But pushing unpopular cultural legislation is dangerous enough. Her agenda doesn't stop there. When you start messing with the mechanics of the national economy, you trigger a reaction from an entirely different, highly unsentimental power center.
The financial market.
Exactly.
Yeah. And she has introduced an economic agenda that essentially functions as Abenomics on steroids.
Right. Named after Shinzo Abe.
Exactly, her mentor.
Yeah.
And Abenomics traditionally relied on three arrows, as he called them. Massive monetary easing by the central bank, heavy fiscal stimulus from the government, and structural reforms to make Japanese business more competitive.
But looking at the numbers in the article, it seems like she is leaning incredibly hard into that fiscal stimulus arrow. I know she's planning massive investments, but how big is the actual price tag?
It is staggering. The new growth strategy targets 370 trillion yen,
Wow.
which is roughly 2.3 trillion US dollars in combined public and private investment between now and 2041.
2.3 trillion.
Trillion, with a T. The government is aggressively returning to state-directed industrial policy. They're picking 17 distinct sectors, from artificial intelligence all the way to anime, across 62 specific product areas, and just throwing the full weight of the state behind them.
But throwing $2.3 trillion at the economy requires finding that money somewhere, right?
Yeah, the math has to work.
And the article points out she has severely loosened fiscal discipline to make this happen. Like, for years, the government's benchmark was achieving a primary budget surplus, but she watered that down to a vague promise of putting the debt-to-GDP ratio on a downward trajectory.
Very vague.
Super vague. And simultaneously, she is promising sweeping consumption tax cuts without outlining how they will actually be funded.
And this combination of massive spending promises and completely vague funding mechanisms is precisely what caused the global financial markets to violently recoil.
It honestly feels very similar to watching a reckless startup founder.
Oh, how so?
Well, imagine a CEO getting on stage, unveiling incredibly ambitious new products, and promising to cut subscription prices for all their users to drive growth.
Oh, right, yeah.
The audience might cheer, right? But backstage, the CFO, which in this metaphor is the bond market, is hyperventilating.
Right.
The CFO knows the math just doesn't add up, the company is taking on massive debt, and bankruptcy is suddenly a very real threat.
That is a perfect analogy. And that panic played out in real time in what the article calls the on-budo shock.
Right.
When the draft of the budget framework was released last month, yields on 10-year government bonds spiked to their highest levels in 3 decades.
Okay, for the listener, let's unpack the mechanism there. Why does a government spending plan cause bond yields to spike so aggressively?
So a bond is essentially an IOU from the government. When investors see a government planning to spend trillions of dollars without a clear way to pay for it, they anticipate 2 things: massive borrowing and future inflation.
Right.
So to borrow that much money, the government has to flood the market with new bonds. When the supply of bonds goes up, their price goes down. And to convince investors to buy these riskier, cheaper bonds, the government has to offer a higher interest rate, or yield.
Got it.
At the same time, because of all this, the Japanese yen weakened to its lowest level in 4 decades.
But Takeichi and her allies publicly claim these market movements are completely unrelated to their spending plans, right?
I mean, sure, that's a convenient political deflection. But investors are clearly spooked by the underlying reality.
Yeah.
There's a palpable fear regarding the independence of the Bank of Japan, the BOJ. While the final budget did include language protecting the BOJ's autonomy, analysts at Morgan Stanley MUFG Securities noted a lingering market perception that the government will just relentlessly pressure the central bank to keep interest rates artificially low just to finance this debt.
Right. The fear is that the central bank will be treated like a bottomless ATM for Takaichi's industrial policy. But, I want to push back on the catastrophe narrative here a bit. The article frames this market reaction as a massive failure of her leadership.
And I actually agree we should challenge that assumption. Because consider the sheer scale of what she's attempting.
Right.
You simply cannot execute a $2.3 trillion economic pivot, artificially stimulating 17 massive sectors, without causing short-term market anxiety.
It's impossible.
Right. This on-budo shock might just be the unavoidable friction of forceful state-directed industrial policy. When a government abruptly changes a nation's economic trajectory, markets invariably experience a period of shock and recalibration as they price in the new reality.
So it's not necessarily a failure.
No, market volatility does not necessarily mean the policy is doomed. It often just signifies that the status quo is being violently disrupted.
So the market panic might literally just be the cost of admission for attempting to rebuild the Japanese economy. But the rebellion against Takaichi isn't just coming from bond traders in London and New York. Like, when a leader faces external pressure, they usually rely on their internal political allies to weather the storm.
Usually, yeah.
Yet Takaichi is facing a massive vocal rebellion from within her own coalition.
The internal grievances are piling up, and they are emerging from every conceivable faction within the Japanese political establishment. And honestly, it is a direct response to her refusal to engage in that Nemawashi consensus building we discussed earlier.
The pile-on is staggering when you look at the specifics. Fiscally hawkish members of her own LDP are complaining to the press, saying we're supposed to be conservative, but we sound like socialists.
That's quite the quote.
Right. And a true heavyweight on the LDP's Consumption Tax Commission actually resigned in protest over her unfunded tax cuts.
And that resignation over tax cuts is particularly telling. Japan has the oldest population and highest debt-to-GDP ratio in the developed world. So the fiscal conservatives in the LDP view consumption taxes as the only reliable way to fund the nation's ballooning Social Security and healthcare costs. To them, cutting those taxes to fund an industrial policy isn't just bad math, it's practically a generational betrayal.
Wow. And the friction extends far beyond economic policy. Socially liberal members of her party heavily objected to the flag desecration law. A former foreign minister conspicuously skipped the vote entirely. Even her coalition partners are turning against her.
Right, the Ishin Party.
Yeah, Yoshimura Hirofumi, the leader of the Ishin Party, which is the LDP's new coalition partner, called the failure to pass his party's priorities, like cutting the number of seats in the Diet, heartbreaking.
And you have to understand, using a word like heartbreaking in public to describe your own coalition partner is a severe breach of Japanese political decorum.
Wow, okay.
And this internal chaos has achieved something genuinely rare in Japanese politics. It has actually united a deeply fractured opposition.
Right. Nishimura Rintaro of the Asia Group points out that these ideologically diverse opposition parties came together for one single reason. They agree the LDP is overstepping its mandate.
Yeah.
In late June, they banded together in the upper house, where the ruling coalition is just a few seats shy of a majority and completely halted Diet proceedings.
But in theory, the LDP can override the upper house using their massive supermajority in the lower house.
Right, they have that blank check.
They do, but doing so is considered the nuclear option. Overruling the upper chamber carries immense political costs because it violates the cultural expectation of compromise. It just makes a prime minister look dictatorial.
And all of this messy public management of the legislature seems to stem directly from how she operates as a leader behind closed doors.
The loner style.
Yes. The article paints a very specific picture of her as a total loner. She disdains schmoozing. She skips the traditional off-the-record drinking sessions used to build political harmony. She completely ignores the Keisha clubs, the exclusive press clubs that Japanese politicians traditionally use to manage the media narrative.
She hates all that.
She does, preferring to communicate directly with the public on social media instead.
And her management of the bureaucracy is equally unorthodox. Senior officials lament that she refuses to have verbal discussions with her advisors, preferring to just sit alone in her office and read dense briefing papers.
Which is so funny to complain about.
Even powerful corporate CEOs complain that she simply does not consult them before making sweeping economic decisions.
She actually boasts about studying so hard that she only sleeps 3 hours a night. And I have to push back hard on the Japanese establishment's complaints here.
Go for it.
I am looking at this list of grievances from the political class, and I'm thinking, shouldn't voters enthusiastically want this exact type of leader?
You mean a leader who alienates the entire power structure?
No, I mean a leader who only sleeps 3 hours a night because she is up reading the actual intelligence briefings instead of sitting in long, pointless, face-saving meetings.
Fair point, fair point.
A prime minister who refuses to engage in backroom schmoozing with wealthy CEOs and instead communicates directly with the public. Why is the political class treating hard work, reading, and transparency as if they are character flaws?
Well, you have identified the exact core of her initial populist appeal. The very qualities that alienate Tokyo's power brokers, her plain-spoken style, her grueling work ethic, her refusal to play the insider game, are exactly what made her one of the most popular prime ministers in modern Japanese history.
Yeah.
That outsider energy is what secured her the 70% approval rating and the supermajority in the first place.
Then why is the system violently rejecting her now? If she has the mandate, shouldn't they fall in line?
Because we are witnessing a collision between an outsider's populist mandate and a deeply entrenched institutional operating system. Tokyo's political machinery requires quiet consultation, giving opponents a chance to save face, ensuring everyone feels heard before a decision is finalized. Takeichi is attempting to operate a top-down, command-driven administration in an environment engineered over decades to resist exactly that type of leadership.
So she's just incompatible with the hardware.
Basically. She has the votes, but she is completely ignoring the invisible social rules that actually make the government function.
A massive legislative engine means nothing if you refuse to learn how to shift the gears, I guess.
That's exactly it.
So where does this leave her administration?
Well, the foundation of her power is beginning to crack under the pressure. The article notes that her approval ratings are steadily eroding.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, it's a compounding effect, you know. Voters are frustrated with persistent, everyday inflation, and there is a lingering cultural backlash against her heavy-handed passage of the imperial succession law.
She isn't facing an immediate existential threat, though, right? I mean, the next party leadership election is more than a year away.
All right, she is secure in her position for now, but that practically guarantees that we are going to see even more explosive political fights on the horizon.
Buckle up.
Seriously, the resistance from the bond markets, the united opposition, and the fractured factions within her own party is only going to intensify as she continues to push her agenda.
It is such a fascinating case study in the limits of electoral mandates, which leaves me with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over a question the article hints at but leaves unanswered. Are modern democratic systems, with all their checks, balances, and deeply entrenched institutional cultures, fundamentally designed to exhaust and break down outsider politicians who refuse to play the traditional consensus game? Does the institutional machinery always win, no matter how big the electoral mandate is?
That is a profound question, and honestly, one that is deeply relevant not just for Japan, but for democracies around the globe currently grappling with populist leaders.
Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.